controversial reactions and restrictions of those freedoms, specifically in the Black Lives Matter movement. In 2012, Trayvon Martin, an unarmed black teenager, was killed. In 2013, the man who killed him was tried and acquitted. In response, the grassroots movement Black Lives Matter, or BLM, was formed. BLM grew into a worldwide movement to speak out about and prevent violence against black people. The movement began in 2013 with 3 women, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi. They started a grassroots movement on social media with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. In 2020, BLM had 4.3 million Instagram followers, led more than 1.2 million political actions taken by members. These acts included writing letters to government officials, signing petitions, and encouraging people to vote.
Burning down
and
cities.
A single email fundraised more than $82 million for local organizations supporting black communities. As the BLM movement shows, sometimes a grassroots movement starts with a simple idea and becomes something much larger. In this case, it started with a hashtag. Beginning in May 2020, protests swept across the nation after a black man, George Floyd, was murdered by a white police officer. Protests broke out first in Minnesota, where the killing took place, but with the help of social media, the Black Lives Matter movement quickly spread to other major cities, including Los Angeles, New York, Portland, Dallas, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C., and even sparked protests in countries around the world. Millions of protesters gathered and marched nationwide and around the world to stand up for social justice and equality for Black Americans. While some protests involved illegal activities such as the destruction of private property, looting of small businesses, or retaliatory violence, reports reveal that 93% of Black Lives Matter protests were nonviolent. Although most demonstrations were peaceful, the protesters were met with challenges from law officials and the police in exercising their First Amendment right. Let's take a look at some of the reactions they faced. The response to the protest varied across the U.S. In many cities, law enforcement used aggressive tactics to dissipate the protesters. This included the use of tear gas, batons, and other aggressive measures to disrupt the protests. As the size and number of the protests increased throughout the U.S., media coverage of the demonstrations also increased. Much of the media coverage focused on law enforcement responses. People from diverse backgrounds joined the protests. As a result, many people called for police response tactic reform as a result of the George Floyd murder and the police's violent responses to the protests. Some of the recent changes across the U.S. include greater oversight of police departments, bans against chokeholds and other restraint tactics, and increased funding for community mental health services. Let's look at some of the responses of law enforcement.
Now let's compare and contrast a little bit. Some of the limitations on